Well, if you saw the title of this episode, then you know what I'm about to talk about. I am going to talk about it. It is a downfall, unfortunately, but we got to kind of go to the point of when it fell and who's to blame for it. Let's get on to this episode. It's going to be a very depressing one. My uncle, along with my mom, introduced me to Star Wars. And ever since I got into Star Wars, I fell in love with it. The original trilogy. And then, of course, I found out about the prequels. The Clone Troopers, they looked awesome. But let's go back to when it was made. It came out in 1977, and it was a big sensation. It was pretty much the beginning of pop culture in a lot of ways. I do kind of look at Star Wars as that pop culture boom for the United States and just the beginning of everything with that. And then within a few years later, we got The Empire Strikes Back. Then a few years after that, Return of the Jedi to end it all. Merchandise, books, all that started to pop up. And then we got the prequels from 1999 all the way into 2005. But boy, through this time, Star Wars was just a big deal. While the prequels had issues, Star Wars was still relevant. Shadow of the Empire, some of the Clone Wars stories, it was awesome. The comics were so good, with great storytelling, character development. The stories were well written, even in the films. At least he was still trying to tell a story. But for the past several years, through the decade of the prequels up until 2012, people bashed on George Lucas because he made changes to the original trilogy of adding certain things to it, which personally I believe actually made the film better, because I do think it added more of that sci-fi feel. I never grew up with the originals, so that's probably why I feel that way. I grew up with the 2004 DVD set.
That's just disappointing. It's like every time you turn around, George Lucas is doing something different to Star Wars or to Indiana Jones. And it's just, the old stuff was the best stuff. I don't understand why we have to bring it back out and trot it out there for everybody and mess with it. And it's not as good as it used to be. I don't get that. Just leave it alone.
I don't think I've ever seen Star Wars, so.
Well, the one that they're going to bring back out in 3D, honestly, it's not worth seeing. It's the worst of all the movies that he made.
However, even throughout the bashing of George Lucas and his work with the prequels and also changing stuff in the original trilogy, Star Wars was relevant when I was growing up. 2005, of course, episode 3. Then 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, it was still relevant. However, in 2012 marked the beginning of the end for Lucasfilms and LucasArts, which also created the video games. In 2012, Disney bought the rights to Lucasfilm and its property Star Wars, led by Bob Iger. Within a few years after the purchase, we would get Force Awakens, which was, at the time, it was a decent start to something that could have been great. It did have a bit of issues that I didn't really see until many years later, but overall it was a good start. And since I was a young lad, I did give it a 10 out of 10 on IMDb, which now that I'm older, I'm a man now, I see the errors of my ways. As the older I've gotten, the more I realize that, no, not really. Anyways, let's continue on. Then we ended up getting a side story of Star Wars, which was Rogue One, which was actually probably the best that Disney popped out. I actually liked it a lot more than Force Awakens, to be honest. It also showed a bit of a plot hole in episode 4, A New Hope, which fixed that problem, but overall it was great. However, things will go downhill from here. The start of the downfall really started when The Last Jedi came out. I had planned to go see it until I started hearing things about it from this one video. Does anybody remember The Amazing Lucas? Yeah. Well, at the time when he was relevant, before he really went downhill, and what he was explaining about every detail of the movie was like, what the heck? What did they do? But it wasn't just me that also saw this issue. A lot of people saw the issues. While there were some good scenes from what I heard, it wasn't enough to save it. The direction, with Rey being a Mary Sue for one thing, Luke Skywalker being a very pathetic old man and being beaten by Rey, there was a lot of issues into this film. Even to this day, I refuse to watch it. Only seeing the cons that it was terrible. Just hearing what they did to these characters and so many other bad writings. Anyways, this was the beginning of the end for Disney's Star Wars. Even after putting out content, there was a 50-50 separation of the audience. 50% lost interest in what Disney was able to do with Star Wars. They just demolished the legacy of these characters, while on the other hand, not knowing how Star Wars actually works. Other group actually liked it. However, the biggest issue that would become the staple of Disney Star Wars was pushing messages on purpose. Look, I get it. When George Lucas made his Star Wars films, there was politics, but it never felt pushy. Nowadays, there's gotta be a message, like purposely a message. It's obvious that they're doing it on purpose compared to back then. And that is the issue with these Star Wars content from Disney. On top of that, not following the lore, not sticking to the better Star Wars stories like the Legend books. I mean, those were great. I didn't have a chance to read all of them, but it's better than most of what Disney puts out. Heck, the comic books were really good. While we did get Mandalorian, which was decent for season 1, keeping actors that are okay with bashing a group of people on one side, however, firing another actor who didn't really bash anybody, but people harassed this actress because she wouldn't put pronouns in her bio. Yeah, we're not gonna forget that, Disney. But yeah, Star Wars is just not the same anymore after the debacle of everything that Disney did with it. I wish the newer stuff just was erased, except for Rogue One and maybe Andor. I heard Andor is actually good, but Mandalorian got ridiculous from what I've heard. I have not seen season 2. I heard it was great. However, like I said, the specific actor decided to attack a group of people, so at the end of the day, I didn't bother to watch. And of course, what Disney did to Gina Carano, it's just a bloodbath with Lucasfilm. So who should we really blame for this disaster of a franchise that was so big in pop culture tumbled down into nothing? It's not even relevant anymore, which is sad. Like I said, when I grew up, it was so relevant. I loved Star Wars. I liked consuming a lot of products of Star Wars, but nowadays, no, not really. I go back to the old stuff that I say is canon. So, who would be guilty in this downfall of this franchise? Would it be Kathleen Kennedy, Lucasfilm, Bob Iger, Disney, J.J. Abrams, or Rian Johnson? I would probably say all of them. Well, let me say J.J. Abrams, while I wouldn't entirely blame him for the problem of Star Wars, he did set the beginning of the end for it with Rey in Force Awakens. However, from what I heard, he did set up a plan for Star Wars, but since they had 2 other directors directing the other 2 films, Rian Johnson decided to take it and do whatever he wanted with it, deconstructing what J.J. Abrams had in mind. So I can't really say it's all J.J. Abrams' fault. He was just given the task at hand to direct Star Wars, and it just didn't come out well with Rise of Skywalker. 2019 was the last year of this pathetic sequel trilogy, which was Rise of Skywalker, and boy, fans were so divided, and I didn't bother to watch that either, except heard some things about it, which was like, okay, I am glad I didn't waste my time with it. Rian Johnson, I will definitely blame for the direction. While look, it's weird enough that he makes really good films, he did a terrible job with Star Wars. From how he just set everything and divided the fan base, this is part of it was on him for the direction. But of course, we will not forget the one that's giving the commands to push these directions with her fan fiction, I would like to say, and that was Kathleen Kennedy, who's running Lucasfilm. Like, what the heck happened? She used to work on all these cool films. She was the producer, helped out George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, but heck, whenever she became president of Lucasfilm, she promised she would keep the characters as they were and not disembody the legacy of these characters or the franchise, but she did. She wanted to push her own fan fiction, her own ideas, and just destroy what George Lucas created. So definitely she is at the top of the chain as the one that destroyed the franchise with her own political viewpoints of the Force is female, feminist crap. But we cannot leave Bob Iger out of it, as he was the one that started this whole thing by buying George Lucas's own property. Once George Lucas signed the paperwork for Bob Iger and Disney to buy Star Wars, that was really the beginning of the end. Everybody didn't really know it would be the beginning of the end. So I would say Bob Iger is also to blame for this too, both him and Kathleen Kennedy. He is the top chain of CEO of Disney, Lucasfilm, and Marvel. So yeah, Bob Iger is to blame for all of this crap that happened with Star Wars, and not just Star Wars, Marvel as well. Marvel is going downhill too, not just Star Wars. That's a franchise of all cool comic characters that is just being flushed down the toilet, either with bad direction, pushing a message, of course, making the male characters pathetic, which is terrible. Everything has to be like a political correctness sort of deal, which is just bad. It's all in Star Wars now with Disney Star Wars, especially Acolyte and a bit here and there with the new content that they've put out. Heck, the writer for Acolyte, who was Harvey Weinstein's assistant. And of course, with Kathleen Kennedy, she has those type of people writing bad stories for Star Wars. This was a disaster from the start. And it's so pathetic too. Yeah, so all in all, I do blame a lot with Kathleen Kennedy for her direction, Bob Iger for executing this disaster by giving whatever to direct whatever and decide to push their messaging. I think another thing that really was suspicious was the fact that the whole rating thing on Rotten Tomatoes, even when you noticed how the ratings never changed. Now in Rotten Tomatoes, ratings tend to change over time, but for some reason, Rise of Skywalker did not change since then, since 2019, which is very suspicious. Heck, even when I was bringing it up, one of the episodes that we did about the sequel trilogy, whether it should be canon or not, my friend was arguing with me about it. This is what happened with people that like Star Wars. Now, whether or not people grew up with it, that's one thing. Some people I don't even think know much about Star Wars or even grew up with it. And that's why they don't really have this attachment. But people that did, like me, it's a big deal because this was something great and Disney destroyed it. Kathleen Kennedy destroyed it. These people in the industry destroyed it. So yeah, these group of people, the companies, guilty for the downfall.
The problem is things started to go a little sideways with The Force Awakens because the character of Rey is such a Mary Sue. Those were the beginning issues for me, and then it was just cemented with the Last Jedi. I never even watched The Last Jedi, but I know what happens.
The way he wrote, like, see, from what Matt told me, he told me that J.J. Abrams had plans for Rey
and
to build it up.
Rian Johnson completely, but J.J. Abrams set the stage for her to be the Mary Sue that she very obviously is. So it's like J.J. Abrams had a hand in it too, and Rian Johnson just took it and decided to just completely toss whatever plans Abrams had and did his own thing, and it pissed a lot of the fans off.
Yeah. But they said that they explained more of how she got all the powers in the comics.
See, I'm not even interested in the comics because I hate her character, so I'm not even going to...
I don't...
Apparently, Kylo Ren downloaded his force training to her.
Oh god.
Yeah, stupid stuff. He told me this. I thought
crappy writing. That's terrible. I cannot. What a lazy butt way to try to fix the whole Mary Sue problem. That is
Did Ryan
pathetic.
Johnson, did he want to direct Star Wars?
Like,
I'm wondering if...
For a trilogy.
Do what now?
He had plans to do another trilogy with Disney.
Yeah, that fell through the cracks.
Maybe, I don't know.
He said he's still doing it.
Oh, really? I thought it had been scrapped.
It probably has been, but he keeps on telling people.
Oh, well,
I'm still doing that trilogy, guys.
Speaking of trilogies in Star Wars, I'm not real thrilled about the Benioff and Weiss involvement in Star Wars after the fiasco that was Game of Thrones. So I think they
Game of Thrones.
well, they can't write. They made that very clear in the last few seasons of Game of Thrones. So I do not think that this next Star Wars of theirs. I mean, they did such a horrible job. I'm not even interested to watch it.
It can't be any worse than last year.
Well,
We hope not.
yeah. Well, it could
It
be
seems
as
like-
bad as.
I
and so
feel like this
therefore-
year, like throughout 2015 up till 2019, the end of the 2010s, I feel like most of the franchises that were so good have been wrecked by either
They-
SJWs, feminists, or bad
just
writing.
terrible writing.
They
yeah.
are going to have to listen to the fans instead of thinking that they can, kind of control everything
Well,
throughout the whole
and
thing.
also instead of putting fans down and calling them toxic, and
Yeah.
then trying to say it's because they're misogynist, and that's such a load of bull.
I mean,
There were very valid reasons for the complaints that people had. It wasn't because they don't like women. It was because the writing was terrible. That's what it was.
They believe they think for everybody.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, by the end of it all, this is what we got from Lucasfilm. Disney's Lucasfilm. So just Star Wars is just not the same anymore. I will just go back to the legend ones and say most of those are canon, while there are certain ones from Disney Star Wars that are pretty good, like Rogue One, some of the Clone Wars. I can insert some of the canon stuff with legends, and then that's it. The sequel trilogy never happened in my mind, but to be honest, I wish all of this stuff, all of the bad stuff that Disney has made and what Kathleen Kennedy has made, I wish it would just all be erased. If only we could somehow just magically erase it from existence, those bad ones, and keep the good ones, then Star Wars would be great again. If only that would happen. What am I doing? What am I filming? There's nothing on the paper. What am I doing here? This is a waste of paper. I don't know what I'm doing here. Anyways, I'm gonna go watch some Star Wars. Maybe read some of those comics. I can't